Hello, this is Ian Summerall, gunmaker for Country Sports TV. Now, I started this channel and I wanted to promote country sports. I wanted to show people what we do, why we do it, and the best way of doing it. So I tried to do it for the public and for ourselves, of things of interest. So when I was doing country shows, I recorded the ring events, because nobody was doing it. And a lot of the ring events are ever so interesting. Some of the techniques for training gun dogs. Understanding about falconry. And of course guns, which is my thing. Now I'm a gunsmith by trade, that's what I do. I did my apprenticeship with I.M. Crushington's in Bath. I did 4 years in Bristol with George Gibbs, where I was the gunsmith and assistant manager. George Gibbs closed down, so I had to get myself another job. I didn't want to go back to Bath. The gun trade was going flat at the time, in the late 80s. I mean, clay shoots that had 50 people on a Sunday morning were down to 5 or 10, if you were lucky. People just stopped shooting. We had a couple of shootings. We had bad press for shooting. People were giving up guns more than they were buying guns. I don't think in Gibbs's we sold a gun for 3 months. You know, my workshop work just disappeared, and I had to pay the mortgage. So I ended up working in industry. I had 2 years making car parts and 2 years making kitchens. Then I got a job with Roxton's in Cirencester, and I worked there until 15 years ago. Roxton's closed their shop in Cirencester, and that was me basically made redundant. So I got hold of my local police force, said, look, I've just been made redundant. I've got work to do. I've got customers want me to do work. I need my own RFD. That was 15 years ago. So I got my own RFD and my own workshop here. Now, I didn't want to be political. I wanted just to promote country sports, talk shooting. But events took a turn. And they've taken another turn now. As you've seen with my videos, they now want to ban lead shot for game shooting. Now, this is a little bit of history. If you are bored with this video, turn off and come back to it. Do it in small chunks. It's going to be a long video. This is a talk that I gave to gun clubs around 2010, 2012. I did a tour of the gun clubs in the area, and I would take a television screen, take my laptop, and these were the plates that I used for the talk, the starting points. And I tell little anecdotal stories on the way through of things that I found out over time. Now, bear with me, it's a long ride. If you haven't got the time to watch this video in one go, watch it in little bits. Please take the time to watch the whole video. There is lots of information that you need to know if you're going to have any chance of fighting this lead ban. This is how I start my talk. We don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. Lead shot is not a problem. That's the first thing that we've got to remember. There's no problem with lead shot at all. Lead is a solid, it's inert, and in its natural state, and what we use lead for, lead shot isn't pure lead. Lead shot is about 5% antimony, which makes it harder. Now, lead shot does not dissolve. It's why they use lead for acid baths. Now, there are different types of lead that are dangerous. Red lead and white lead. And we're not dealing with them. But what they've done is they've said, oh, we've taken lead out of pencils and we've taken lead out of paint. Now you're using lead shot. No, they're different types of lead. That's the first thing we got to get on our brain, is that lead shot is not toxic. They started calling it toxic shock and nobody questioned it. They got rid of lead for wildfowlers. And BASC persuaded the wildfowlers to give up lead for a year, and then because the shooting organisations agreed with the lead ban, it happened. The Secretary of State could sign a piece of paper and the lead ban for wildfowling was done as a statutory instrument. Before he signed that piece of paper, I was told when I worked for the civil service that if BASC said no, they didn't have the scientific proof to bring a lead ban in and it wouldn't happen. I told BASC this at the time and I was ignored. The same's true today. The science has not changed. What has changed is the rhetoric, the bullshit that we're being given. A gunsmith's technical term I use there. Occasionally I come up with them, so please forgive me if you don't like that language, but it's a gunsmith's technical term for misleading, lies and untruths. Bullshit. We are being fed bullshit, and we're not mushrooms. We're not in the dark. We know the truth. So, where does it all come from? Now, the plan to ban lead shot goes back and right up to world government. Now, before you start calling me a conspiracy theorist, this is what we found out. When I met with John Swift at the Deer Initiative, he said that we couldn't defend lead. And I started looking at the science that had come up. And I went right the way through. Follow the paper. You know, like they say, follow the money. I followed the paperwork. And the plan to ban lead shot for wildfowling goes back to world government. There was an international agreement to ban lead over wetlands, included in the Afro-Eurasia Waterbird Agreement, which BASC was a member of. This was funded by the United Nations Environment Programme. So the United Nations are involved in this. Now, the agreement comes down through. They've got the ban for wildfowling. They got the ban for lead for fishing. Now they want the ban for the rest of us. So, what do? They say, oh, to be able to sell game shot, we have to remove the lead. We have to use steel. This is what they're doing. They're not banning lead completely. It's a stealth approach. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, if you like. If they come out and do it in one go, everybody be up in arms. So, what they're telling shooters is, oh, you pigeon shoot, it doesn't affect you. Or your crow shooting, or your air rifle shooting, or your 2-2, it doesn't affect you, that's not a problem. It affects everybody. They want to ban lead, full stop. Lead is the best material we can use. And that's all there is to it. Steel is not a good alternative. Tungsten is toxic. They had to close the ranges down when they were using tungsten, but we'll talk more about that later. Now, to help with the propaganda to try and get lead ban for all shooting, back in 2008, the WWT and the government and BASC got together and formed something called the Lead Shot Compliance Research. And they wanted to do research on the compliance with lead shot on wildfowling. This was in 2008. And if you see by this, this is from the minutes. And I've taken snapshots of the minutes to put to the relevant points. And I got hold of these minutes from a Freedom of Information request to the government. Because it was a government committee, they had to let it out. Now, the department in Bristol that deals with this was upstairs from me in Tollgate House originally. They're now in Temple Keys in Bristol, but they moved. But this was my old office. And it agreed that John Harradine should be attending the steering group meetings as a subcontractor. Fascinating, isn't it? You'll find that John Swift and Harradine are right the way through all this. BASC are up to their eyeballs in it. They are not supporting us one little bit. Their job is to try and persuade us to give up lead. I said this years ago and nobody believed me. They believe me now, I tell you. Now the steering group was set up. Now we know that Harradine is going to attend the meeting as a subcontractor. Also involved in it, and the RSPB were going to be a corresponding member of the steering group. So they were going to be shown the minutes and they could reply to the minutes. So what happened there, I don't know. I haven't seen any of the correspondence between the two. But this proves that the RSPB was involved in it as well. So we've got the WWT, the government, we've got BASC, and we've got the RSPB. Now, those groups go through on. This is the start of it. This is the compliance report that they did. And this, it's all contrived. They're all working together on this. What they were going to do was do a survey and find out if lead was still being used to shoot wildfowl. Now, this is the milestone that the committee were going to go through. They wanted a database of game dealers. They wanted to purchase game. They wanted a survey of BASC members. And they also wanted a shoot managers database and questionnaire. This is not looking good, is it? You know, let's go on. Let's see what happens next. Now, this is what they were going to do. They were going to buy a number of birds per region and sample them to see if they had shot in them. Now, I was told from a BASC insider that BASC knew the shoot that would use lead on the last day on a duck drive and the dealer where they could get the duck from. So really supporting us, BASC, really good. You know, if you're defending somebody, You do not go out and find the evidence to convict them. That's for your accusers to do. This is the cost of the survey. Milestone 1 would be £15,000. Milestone 2, £20,000. Milestone 3, £15,000. Milestone 4, £11,557. Milestone 5 would be £2,000. Total cost £63,557. And who was getting this money? Who was doing the surveying? BASC. So BASC were being paid to sell us down the river. Do you see what's happening? The WWT did this survey on testing the duck and the x-rays. And they got 647 ducks, which they had to buy. So the WWT was also getting money out of the government for this. Only 4% of the ducks shot were in feather. They're saying that 96% of the duck were oven ready. There is no proof that the duck that they bought was shot in England or Wales at the time of the survey. At the time that they did the survey, it was legal to shoot duck in Scotland. The duck could have been farmed. There was no proof that it was duck shot in England. Duck are moved around all over the place. They could have come from anywhere. And this was the biggest thing that let this survey down, was they couldn't prove where the duck had come from. In the minutes, it says that there's a possibility that the birds might have been shot to order. And they said it could be about 15 to 20% of the birds. Well, how can they only have 4% in feather, yet the rest are already oven ready, ready for the shops, bought off the shelf? It doesn't make any sense. I could never understand this, but this is what the survey says. Now, just take a minute and just read this part of the minutes. And then stop the video, look at the screen and just read this. Now, what do you think it means? You heard what I said earlier. Is this been contrived? It doesn't prove it. You know, this was done over 2 winters. And BASC are right up to their necks in it. Who is there to speak on our behalf? Now, this is all to lead up to what's happening today with the proposed lead ban for game shooting. It is linked. It's all a progression. Now then, this is what the survey ended up saying. This was all over the Shooting Times and shooting magazines. I think it even made the national press. The WWT survey said that 75% of the duck had lead in them, and the BASC survey said that 45% of the shooters, BASC members, still used lead for shooting duck. And they said it was non-compliance with the lead ban. Now, as I said previously, 75% of the duck, they cannot prove that the ducks were shot illegally. It was legal at the time to shoot ducks in Scotland. The game trade moved ducks around the country. So that's that one out. 45% of members is anecdotal evidence. There's no proof that this was actually happened. People may have just said, oh yeah, occasionally, if you occasionally do it because you're out shooting, I don't know, you're out shooting crows and a duck comes in. It's happened to me when I was decoying. I was decoying crows and I had a duck come in. Couldn't believe it. But we didn't have the lead ban at that time, so I was all right. I shot the duck with lead. I gave it to some friends of mine, and she was Malaysian, and she'd done sweet and sour duck. Absolutely wonderful meal. So this is what we're up against. They're trying to find the evidence, and the theory was that the only way to stop ducks being shot with lead was to ban lead for all shooting. This is back in 2010. This was the mantra. Now, you've got to remember that the lead ammunition group had started up. They'd had the steering group. They'd done this survey. Now what's going to happen? I know this is fiddling with figures, but this is just a way of looking at it. They bought 645 duck. They found shot in 497 of them. They said that 75% of them, that's 444, duck had lead in them. So they said that 70% of the duck had lead in. Now, 144 is 53% of the total number of the ducks that they bought. So 50%, 53.3% of the duck had lead in them. Not 70% of the ones said. This is how they spin things. This is how they spin the information to make it look bad for shooting. Now, lead is still the best thing to shoot animals with. Steel is not as effective as lead. It's not as good as lead. I've never said it wouldn't work, I just said it's not as good. And it will also damage your gun. When I used to sell steel cartridges in Roxton's, one of the things I used to tell everybody is I have to tell you that steel shot may damage your barrels. I didn't want a customer coming back to me and saying, this steel shot damaged my barrels. So every time I sold steel shot, I said, you have to be aware that steel shot may damage your barrels. And I've got photographs of it. I'll put one up here of the scrapes in the barrels from steel shot. The steel shot is even going through the wads, as you can see by this photograph. I had one guy come in here with his gun, and they weren't very big scratches, but they were lines all the way down the barrel. He fired his gun once with steel. Now, I know there are wildfowlers out there who say they use steel all the time and haven't had a problem. This is true, but still a possibility that using steel can damage your barrels, and as a gunsmith, I have to point that out. Now, this is October 2010. In the minutes it says that the WWT have submitted their final report and are seeking the approval to publish this report. And this is to Tim Andrews. And Tim Andrews worked in the office upstairs from me in Tollgate House. Nice lad, moving up through the ranks I see now. When you go through the paperwork, there's some questions and answers at the end when it was published. And it says, was the report peer reviewed? And this is the reply. This is gospel. You can't believe this is supposed to be scientific. And it says, for the research, a steering group, representatives from DEFRA, Natural England, WWT and BASC, was established to guide the project through each stage and review the report. So, the very people that set up the steering group, did the surveying, got paid for it, because the WWT and BASC got money out of it, also reviewed their own work. This is not how peer review works. You cannot peer review your own papers. It's just laughable. And they turn around and say, oh yes, it was peer reviewed, like sugar. This is what we're up against. Bad science all the way down the line. Procedures not followed. You know, this has got to stop. We've got to have honest science. And honest science has got to be on our side. The truth is on our side. Now, this is a screenshot of the front page of the Lemon Ammunition Group website. The website was set up by BASC. You've got BASC, Country Landowners Association, Gun Trade Association, Game Dealers. You've got the Game and Wildlife Trust, and you've got the Countryside Alliance. Now, note that BASC are on the front page of the original website. Now this plate is from the minutes of the BASC Research Advisory Committee. Let's stop the video, read the screen. Okay? Now let's start on. This is JPH, it's John Harrodine, giving the committee an update and the committee's recommendations to the BASC Council. The BASC Council never voted on this at all. In the light of growing evidence and problems with lead ammunition, the committee believes that the use of lead ammunition in shooting and stalking is become increasingly unsustainable. So they're working to get lead banned. Why stalking all of a sudden has been added to this? Because there was a paper, I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a deer that was shot and all the leg fragments were in the back end of the deer. The deer was shot with ballistic tips. Ballistic tips were not designed for shooting deer. They were designed to shoot vermin, coyotes and groundhogs. Now, there's no proof that the lead contaminated the meat, but they said it did. They tested the muscle where there was no wound, and they tested the wound itself for the level of lead. They said there was more lead in and around the wound than from the clean muscle. Well, yes, there might be, but it does not prove the contamination came from the lead ammunition. The wound is the blood and the muscle combined. The muscle and the blood have their own natural lead level. combining the two will increase that lead level. There is no proof that the lead contaminates the meat. But this survey said they did. This is why stalking's been added to the problem. This is what we're up against. They're using bad science and not fighting and not questioning it. They're just going along with it. And they are also looking at air rifle ammunition on this. It's not just going to be stalking. You know, this is back in November 2009, before the Lead Ammunition Group even started. This was when they were doing the survey, before the survey was published, and the BASC Research Advisory Committee was telling the council that they wanted lead banned. And that was Harrodyne. Harrodyne is linked with Swift. This is how it all works. This is the recommendation that went from the BASC Research Advisory Committee to the BASC Council, to recommend to Council in January that the ban on lead ammunition is expected sooner rather than later, and that members should be prepared for an early change. This is 2009. So BASC knew where they were going. That brings us up to today. We're 10 years on, 11 years on, and BASC are still playing the same cards. BASC have not defended lead any way along this road. I cannot find any evidence of it. If anybody knows where BASC have saved lead or have campaigned to save lead, just let me know. I'll interview you. I can do a Skype interview on this video. It's not a problem. Now, I found this in the report from the Gain Group. And this was back in 2009 at the same time. They said that the consumption of game meat shot with lead to consumers, and said that the risk was low. I would have put very low, but they just put low. There is no risk whatsoever. We know it. There's no science to prove that lead's wrong. It's only these anti-lead people that are coming up with the junk that they are and the junk science to try and prove their case. They cannot prove it. I was told this when I worked for the civil service, that they did not have the scientific proof to ban lead. And that's it. There is no evidence to ban lead. So we're getting all this propaganda and rhetoric to try and persuade us to give up lead. One of the papers that the Lead Ammunition Group were looking at, the actual conclusion of the paper was that they couldn't distinguish the difference between the background lead levels and the abnormal lead levels. And it says they were not well defined. This is the same with the Norwegian report that they did on hunters that ate lead-shot game, deer and grouse from Norway. They actually found that hunters that ate lead-shot game had a lower lead level in their blood than people that lived in the town that didn't eat lead-shot game. Work that one out. The science is there. You just have to look at it and read it and understand it. There is enough evidence to fight our case. Question for you. How toxic is non-toxic shot? Interesting question, yes? Let's have a look at that a minute. In an article about tungsten bullets, which the American Army was using, it says that the American Army produced green training ammunition designed to be less toxic and more environmentally friendly than lead-filled rounds. But these bullets may have left firing ranges contaminated and exposed soldiers to new health risks, and the Army has stopped producing these bullets. What they found was that tungsten was toxic. It was giving the Army personnel flu-like symptoms on the range. It was contaminating the water source. The governor issued a cease and desist order to stop the tungsten-based ammunition being used by the military. Now, hadn't anybody told you this? What's the effect of tungsten shot? I don't know the answer. This has shown a problem. Is there going to be a problem with tungsten shot that they're telling us that we've got to use because it's non-toxic? I've now proven that tungsten has a toxic effect. It is dangerous to health. It's causing health problems in the Army, and it is polluting the watercourse. So tungsten ammunition is not a non-toxic ammunition. Case proven. Let's move on. Now, problem we've got is it still safer for us to use lead than to try and use the so-called green non-toxic alternatives? Or rephrase that, the toxic alternatives. Now they say that we should be using steel. Steel is not as good as lead. I can prove that. That's not a problem. It is scientifically impossible for steel to be ballistically as good as lead. The problem we've got is that the ballistics that we're using is from a guy called Rossiter in the United States. And it is found in the States they've tried to replicate his findings, and they have found that his ballistics are misleading. They're wrong. Rossiter suggests that we should go up 2 shot sizes to get the same effect as lead. So if you're using number 6 for game, then you should use 4s in steel, and you would get the same effect. This is untrue. I've done my own tests. I found that steel shot number 4 standard proof cartridges, I used Ely Grand Prix lead, 1 1/16 6s, and 1 1/16 in steel in 4s. Both standard proof cartridges. I found that the steel was 20% less effective than the lead. Proof. I used yellow pages, and I shot the yellow pages, and I counted the number of pages that the shot had gone through. It was a penetration test. I wasn't worried about the energy, because although the pellet might actually have the energy going through the air, when it strikes an object, the mass of it, the size of it, all differs for how far it's going to go into that animal and do the damage. And I found that steel was 20% less effective than lead. In reports now coming out for the States, is they're saying you should go up 4 shot sizes. So you shouldn't use 4s steel to be the same as 6 lead. You should use 2s. But you can't use 2 in steel shot in standard proof guns. And the other thing they're now talking about is allowing us to use higher velocity and higher loads to use steel shot. The same pressures and cartridges that they use in the States. Now, Brownings that come out of Belgium, I'm told in the States that on there they now write do not use steel shot in them. If we're to use steel shot cartridges, our high performance proof is only a magnum load. It's high pressure cartridges. It will not take the American higher velocity and higher load in steel. So they're trying to get the proof houses to proof guns with a higher velocity. So we're going to end up with a high magnum proof gun. I don't know what they're going to call it. Very high pressure guns, magnum guns. I don't know what they're going to call the pressure. But that would be for steel. Now the problem we got is the proof house can't proof guns with steel. The proof house charter only allows them to proof the gun with lead. And we know from tests that have been done that steel shot creates a 15% more pressure in the chamber than lead. Lead, when it hits the forcing cone, squashes slightly. Steel, when it hits that forcing cone, does not squash. There's no resistance. So it stops and creates a 15% extra pressure in the chamber. So guns to create and handle this extra pressure are going to have to be about 10 or 12 pounds in weight, the whole gun. Barrels are going to have to be thicker, actions are going to have to be thicker. You know, are you going to go game shooting with a 10 or 12 pound gun? We use lead in game guns because game guns can range between 6 and 7 pounds. They're easy, they're light to handle, they move easily, they fit the shoulder. I can't see a game shooter standing on a peg with a 10 or 12 pound gun. It's like standing on the peg with an old wildfowling gun, an old 10 bore. Because that's what it's going to be like. It's going to be uncomfortable. And what are the cartridges going to cost us? It's going to make shooting unaffordable for the ordinary guy. But they're saying, oh, it only affects game shooter, and they're the rich people. Yes. But are they going to want to pay the extra money for the cartridges to be able to shoot game? And have that extra weight heavy gun? I don't know the answer to that one. That's still to be worked out. But then, I know, I'm sorry this has been a long-winded interview, and I've been sounding off. But, you know, these are things you have to know. And in the middle, 2012, 2013, BASC even tried to take me to court. I could not believe it. I had the proof. I knew what BASC were doing. They were working for us to get rid of lead. And I said it. I said it publicly. That BASC are working to get a lead ban. This report now that they've just put out for a voluntary lead ban for game shooting is all part of it. It proves my case. But I didn't have what we know now. This is a post that was put up on Pigeon Watch before I was banned. This David BASC, whoever he is, was replying to Andrew, and he says, yes, the logo was removed when John Swift was no longer a member of BASC staff. He is now retired, and BASC no longer have any active member of staff in the position on the group. Now, it says that other than the Secretariat. No, BASC were also running the website for them. John Swift was still in place. You know, you can't say, oh, we've walked as well. You know, and today this proves that BASC were still in on it. BASC were not defending lead at all. BASC were up to their eyeballs in it. I told this David BASC he didn't have a clue what he was talking about. He made other comments that we shouldn't be using steel in Damascus barrels. And I said, oh, why's that? He said, our expert, Dr. Harradine, yes, some bloody expert, Dr. Harradine, said you can't use steel in Damascus barrels because they unravel. Well, I admit there was photographs in an American magazine of somebody who used steel in Damascus barrels, and the barrels did split. If the barrels are rusty and they're Damascus and there's a split in it and a fault, they will even split with lead. So that's not an argument. So, BASC advice is you cannot use steel in Damascus barreled guns. So that rules out antique muzzleloaders and a lot of antique game guns that are Damascus barrels. Where does that leave us? Oh, they say you can use bismuth. Who can afford bismuth at £30 a box? You know, the ordinary guy out there it can't afford 30 quid for a box of cartridges. This is unsustainable. Lead is still the best affordable thing for shooting that we can use. The problem we've got now is, do we want the cure to be worse than the disease? This is what I said to start with. What do you think? Put comments below. You know, we cannot let this go. We have to fight this, and it's up to you. Every shooter is now got to join together, individually and in groups. Join the Save Our Lead Shot Facebook group, and at least then you can say, I'm a member of the Save Our Lead Shot group. That's a start. We cannot rely on our shooting organisations. They've all come out and said they want this. They are not speaking for us, and we have to tell the government they are not speaking for us. It is up to us now to fight back. Ian, getting very angry. We have got to stop this. Otherwise, shooting will not be the same in 10 years' time. Ian, Country Sports TV here, signing off. Sorry it was long and winded and bits of paperwork for you to read and all the rest of it. But this is important information that you needed to know. Anyway, Ian, goodbye. And together we can win.